Back in the early 2000s, the idea of engaging with strangers from the internet was seen as almost inherently dangerous. This is, after all, one of the low-key messages of To Catch a Predator. The show portrayed the internet as a super dangerous place full of guys named Hamburger. But nowadays, some of my best friends are those I've made via the internet. I've even tried to ineffectually meet girls on the internet. I don't know what I'd do if I couldn't stalk my favorite Chinese gooseberry forum for news about a fat redneck in Virginia getting beat up in Portugal. That said, one valuable lesson from the early internet has been lost. That lesson, as turned into a catchphrase by the forum as something awful, is "don't touch the poop." That phrase refers to the idea that if you engage with an idiot online, you're likely to become a bit of an idiot yourself. In other words, you can't touch the poop without a little bit smearing back on you. There are 3 good examples of this concept I want to discuss. They involve the recent drama with Mr. Metokur, some fairly recent violence involving Ethan Ralph, and some old drama with ChrisChan. All 3 topics involve touching the poop in different ways, and they have vastly different results based on how they interact with what are, in my mind, 2 unspoken but fundamental rules about interacting with e-celebrities. Before I explore some examples of touching the poop going wrong, allow me to elaborate a bit on the don't touch the poop rule in the first place. At least in my mind, there are at least 2 unspoken but foundational rules about handling so-called internet personalities that merge into the existence of the don't touch the poop rule. One of these rules is that you criticize those personalities only to the extent that they make those aspects of themselves online. For example, if I went off and made a YouTube channel where I played guitar and somehow became famous, then I would open myself up for criticism for my guitar playing. That said, I feel like most people would agree that it would be unreasonable for someone to criticize my college research papers, or something like that. In other words, you only criticize what someone is putting out there on the internet. In turn, if they put it out on the internet, they are inviting praise and criticism, but they can't assume to receive only praise. This is actually a concept at least in spirit, codified in some aspects of American law. For example, the so-called public figure doctrine essentially raises the standard for libel for public figures, seemingly recognizing that public figures insert themselves into the public discussion, and that it would be unfair to let those public figures sue people selectively based on whether the discussion was good or bad. The other of the 2 foundational rules is that if you make fun of people, you have to be actually funny and not just trying to get even. Stated differently, no one cares about how you actually feel about someone. The important thing is that you're funny. So, for example, it's totally fine and appropriate to roast an internet personality, even one you like, as long as you are funny. That said, no one wants to read a 50-page genuinely angry screed about how much that same internet personality hurt your feelings. Putting those 2 principles together, you can see why not touching the poop becomes something of a rule in most online communities. It's totally fun and encouraged to praise or criticize internet personalities for their online behavior. After all, they purposefully availed themselves to that praise or criticism. That said, people regularly take it too far. They dig into inconsequential aspects of a personality's life, or simply do stuff that's not funny. As a result, they become just as bad, if not worse, than the person they're seeking to criticize. So with that being said, let's turn to my first topic, the recent harassment of Mr. Metokur. For those of you not obsessively keeping up with online drama like I am, internet personality Mr. Metokur's address has apparently been leaked on the internet. Unfortunately, the original use of this leak was less than positive. During a stream hosted by Metokur, someone swatted Mr. Metokur's house. In other words, someone sent armed police to Metokur's house on false pretenses, hoping that he would be hurt. I cannot express enough how reprehensible this is, as all swatting is. It doesn't really need to be said that wasting police time and resources to scare and potentially hurt someone on the internet is stupid. But perhaps more importantly, the whole swatting attack on Mr. Metokur was just not funny. It wasn't particularly clever, and most felt like it was some desperate attack by some butthurt loser. Really, it says a lot more about the person making the call than the target. They can't come up with some legitimate criticism or amusing parody of Mr. Metokur, so they just try to scare the hell out of him, for some reason. Thankfully, the drama seems to have died down, and internet folks are using Metokur's address for something a bit better than police calls. Evidently, a lot of people are now stopping by Metokur's house like it's some sort of shrine, dropping off food and otherwise trying to be friendly internet neighbors. It's weirdly adorable, and way more interesting than the swatting.
Okay, that's very funny. No, that wasn't another SWAT, chat. That wasn't another SWAT. I've been gifted a bag of, I believe, 20 pounds of potatoes. Somebody has gone on a pilgrimage to deliver potatoes to me.
That said, as cute as the new food drop-offs have been, this whole Metokur address thing seems like a step too far. Metokur clearly made efforts to hide his identity and address, and now the internet is literally showing up at his doorstep for attention. And at least in the case of these swatting efforts, it's just not funny. It seems weirdly transgressive for something that's just not amusing at all. The aforementioned drama with Metokur is not too dissimilar from the recent drama with Ethan Ralph, though it has taken a bit of a different path. If you're unfamiliar with Ethan Ralph, I've made an entire video about him, which I'd obviously recommend watching since I'm a desperate small YouTuber. As an aside, I'll admit that my past video does have some errors. That's mostly because I still have issues figuring out what suspiciously underage girl he's trying to impregnate at different times. That said, since that video, Ralph has accelerated to an even worse downward spiral. In fact, it seems plausible that his supporters are the ones that swatted Metokur in the first place. In any event, long story short, Ralph went back to Portugal a second time, and also got beat up in the street a second time. If you'll recall, in the first time Ralph got beat up in Portugal, he was non-specific about his aggressors. Most on the internet, myself included, surmised that Ralph was quiet about his attackers because he was likely up to no good. The second time Ralph got beat up was a bit different. Random other wannabe personalities flew to Portugal, found Ralph, and then proceeded to attack him on the street. In other words, Ralph was for the most part just waddling around Portugal pretending to be important, and some other people sought him out specifically to instigate trouble. There's no need to mince words here. The attackers, in this case, were in the wrong. They literally flew from one country to another to harass and antagonize Ralph, then found themselves in the world's dumbest fistfight with a bowling ball-shaped man. This fight was what I'd call an edge case, an area where we might have a fair debate over whether my two foundational rules were violated. First, it's up for debate whether Ralph invited this beatdown. It seems plausible that Ralph purposefully stuck his neck out and asked for this sort of behavior. Ralph was literally live streaming his trip to Portugal and bragging about his superiority, and one could easily argue that he was inviting a confrontation with someone, as he tends to do. Of course, the reverse could be argued as well. There are plenty of annoying live streamers in Lisbon right now, and the mere act of being a blowhard and live streaming does not mean that you implicitly agree to a fistfight. Second, the second fight was admittedly funny. While everyone involved was unquestionably an idiot, it was admittedly hilarious to watch the equivalent of a trailer park brawl exported from America right to the beautiful streets of Portugal. I will admit that it was especially hilarious that part of this fight had to do with proving that Ralph was short. Let's end this discussion with an example of when touching the poop goes relatively well. Some of the earlier, but not the later, pranks pulled on ChrisChan. Admittedly, almost all people who have directly engaged with ChrisChan are idiots. They've crossed a variety of lines, have behaved poorly, and generally deserve all of the criticism we can possibly provide them. In fact, there's a good argument to be made that ChrisChan's current situation is directly attributable to certain folks egging certain behavior on. That said, there's one period of ChrisChan's history that is routinely proffered as a good example of touching the poop: the so-called Liquid Chris saga. In short, the Liquid Chris saga was a short period of time when an individual referred to as Liquid Chris began to mimic ChrisChan and asserted that he was the true and honest Christian Weston Chandler.
Look, Chris, listen, I was kind enough to accept that the fact that you are actually a Christian W. Chandler. That you
yes,
were born as a Christian.
My name is Christian Weston Chandler.
All right, fine. Your name is Christian Weston Chandler, but the fact
Yes.
is you're born with that name. You are not the Christian Weston Chandler that was born as Christopher Weston Chandler, who's the original creator of Sonic and Roast Shoe.
No,
Look,
no.
I have asked you nicely to please stop pretending. For the sake of Casey, she really cares about you.
I'm not pretending anything, and you need to stop slandering me with your lies onto YouTube.
This whole situation sounds a bit blasé, admittedly, but some genuinely funny stuff happened as a result of the Liquid Chris saga. The two purported ChrisChans battled in karaoke contests, over their ability to speak Spanish, and even over the heart of a girl that the real ChrisChan had never actually met.
Yes, I do love you, Casey. If you want to come back to me and leave him, or you want to stay with him, I mean, you know, I support you emotionally either way.
The vast majority of things that happened during the Liquid Chris saga followed both of my foundational rules very well. First, with very few exceptions, Liquid Chris never engaged with the real ChrisChan more than ChrisChan seemingly wanted. The vast majority of the back and forth was conducted via calls and YouTube videos, and often were instigated by ChrisChan, not Liquid Chris. In other words, it was clear that ChrisChan could have ended the saga at any time, though that might require a bit more self-restraint than I've ever seen ChrisChan exercise. Second, and again with very few exceptions, what happened during the Liquid Chris saga was hilarious. For example, in one instance, ChrisChan attempted to show up Liquid Chris by speaking in extremely poor Spanish. Liquid Chris responded with a combination of relatively more fluent Spanish, French, German, and Japanese. It was dumb, but just clever enough to shine a light on the ridiculousness of the situation.
Hola, este es el verdadero Ricardo Weston Chandler, impostor en el pequeño chaleco.
Perhaps best of all, I should note that the Liquid Chris saga never escalated quite like how other forms of harassment have occurred with ChrisChan. Liquid Chris ended the saga only after a few months, tying the events into a nice little bow. So let's sum things up. If you do decide to touch the poop with an e-celebrity, the best strategy is to be like Liquid Chris, not the folks who swatted Mr. Metokur or the idiots that attacked Ralph. Allow the e-celebrity to engage on their own terms. Only criticize what they put on the internet, and try to be genuinely funny, rather than settle a score. Otherwise, as the phrasing suggests, you're likely to get poop on your hand. That said, I cannot emphasize enough that touching the poop is a bad idea almost all the time. Internet celebrities are unpredictable. It can be hard to keep things under control, and most of the time you'll never be as funny as you'll think you'll be. And, of course, if you find yourself looking for an e-celebrity's real address or trying to find them in real life, you're probably being an idiot by default and need to calm down. Thank you very much for watching this video. I look forward to your feedback in the comments.